Hi friends, continuing to the chapter The Prophet of Yarnwood. On a warm July afternoon in the towns of Yarnwood, North Carolina, a woman named Alta Towers went out to her yard to fill the bird feeder. She opened her sack of sunflower seeds, lifted the bird's feeder lid, and that was when, without warming, the vision assailed her. It was like a walking dream. The trees and the grasses and the birds faded away, and in their places she saw a blinding flashes of a light so searchingly bright she staggered backwards, dropped her sack of bird seeds, and fell to the ground. Billows of fire rose around her, and a hot wind roared. She felt herself flung high into the sky, and from there she looked down on a dreadful scene. The whole earth boiled with the flames and black smoke. The noise was terrible, a hallooing and a crashing and a crackling, and finally, when the firestorm subsided, there came a silence that was more terrible still. When the vision finally faded, it left Antha stunned. She lay on the ground, unable to move, with her mind all jumbled and the birds picking at the splintered bird seeds around her. She might have lay there for hours if Mrs. Brenda Benson had not happened to come by few minutes later to bring her a basket of strawberries. Seeing Alta on the ground, Mrs. Beeson rushed forward. She bent over her friend and spoke to her, but Alta only moaned. So Mrs. Beeson used her cell phone to call for help. Within a minute, four of her best friends, the doctor, the police chief, the town mayor, and the minister of the church, had all arrived. The doctor squatted beside Alta and spoke slowly and loudly. "Can you tell us what is wrong?" he said. "What is it?" Alta shivered. Her lips twisted as she tried to speak. Everyone leaned into her. "It is God," she whispered. "God? I saw." She trailed off. "Merciful heaven," said Brenda Beeson. She had a vision. Of course, they didn't know at the first what her vision had been, though maybe she would have seen God. But why would that frighten her so? Why should she be muttering about the fire and the smoke and the disasters? Day went by, and Althea didn't get better. She lay on her bed, hardly moving, staring into the air and mumbling. Then, exactly a week later, a clue to an mystery came. The President of the United States announced that a talk within Flanax Nation had reached a crisis. The leaders would not give into on its or on their demands, and the leaders of the United States would not give into their or on into theirs unless some sort of an agreement could be reached. The president said it might be necessary to go to the war. Brenda Beeson made the connections right away. War, that must be what Althea Tower had seen. Mrs. Beeson called her friends. They told their friends, the newspaper wrote it up, and soon the whole town knew Alta Tower had seen the future, and it was terrible. All over the Yarnwood, people gathered in a frightened cluster to talk. Could it be true? The more they thought about it, the more it seemed it could be. Althea had always been a quiet, sensible person, not the sort of make the things up. And these were the stranger times. What these conflicts and the terrorists and the talk of end of the world. Just the kind of a times when visions and the miracles are likely to happen. Brenda Beeson formed a community to take care of Althea and pay attention to anything else she might say. People wrote letters to the newspaper about her and left flowers and the ribbons and the handwriting notes in the front of her houses. The minister spoke of her in the church. After a few weeks, nearly everyone was calling her the prophet. Nikki Randall's first sight of the town of Young Woods was a white steeple rising out of an pine forest. that covered the mountain side. She leaned forward, gazing through the windshield of the car. Is that it? Hey, Aunt Crystal, who was driving, put one hand up to the shield by uh, her eyes from the rays of setting the sun. That's it, she said. My new home, said Nicky. You have to get to the notion out of your mind, said Crystal. It is not going to happen. I'm going to make it happen, thought Nicky, though she didn't say it out loud. Crystal's mood was already bad enough. How long till you get there? She asked. We will be there in 25 minutes. If nothing else, get it your way. A lot had gotten in the way so far. The street line trains was closed down because of the crisis, so they have to drive. They had been on the road for 10 hours through the trip from the Falifida should have taken no more than 5. But long lines at the gas stations decker around the pothole or the snow-covered stretches of an highway and a military roadblocks had slowed them down. Crystal didn't like the delays. She was a fast-moving, efficient person, and when her way was blocked, she became very tense and spoke with her lips in two hard lines. They came to the Yonkwood exit, and Crystal turned off the highways on the road that would uphill. Here the trees grew thick on the either sides, and so tall that their bare branches met overhead. Making a canopy of the sticks, a drop of rain began to spatter the car's windshield. After a while, they came to a sign that said One Wood, Pop 2460. The trees thinned out and the rain fell harder. They passed a few storage sheds, a collapsing barn, and a lumber yard. Other houses begins to appear on the side of a road. Small, tried-looking wooden houses, their roofs dripping. Many of them had rockers and couches on the front porch, where the people would not, no doubt, be sitting it if weren't the dead of winter. From a small brick shelter at the side of a road, a policeman stepped out holding a red stop signal. Kay held it up and waved it at them. Crystal slowed down, stopped and opened her window. The policeman bent down. He had on an rain jacket with the hood up, and rain dripped on the hood and onto his nose. Hello, ma'am, he said. Are you resident? No, said Crystal. Is that a problem? Just doing a route entry checkup, man. The man said, part of our safety programs. He had some evidences lately of a possible terrorist activity in the woods. You propose here. My grandfather has died, Crystal said. My sister and I have an inherited in his house. I have come to fix the house up and sell it. Then the man glanced at Nicky. This is your sister? This is my niece, said Crystal, my sister's daughter. And your grandfather name? Said the man. Arthur Green, said Crystal. Ah, yes, the police said. A fine gentleman, he smiled. You be careful while you're here now. You have been report indicating there might be agents of and Phanex nations traveling alone or in a small groups in a part of an area. Have you been spoken to by any suspicious stranger? No, said Crystal. Just you. You seems very suspicious. Ha ha, said the man, not really laughing. All right, ma'am, he went on. You may go. Sorry for the delay. But as you know, there is a crisis. We are taking every precautions. He stepped away and they drew on. Terrorists even here, Nicky said. It is nonsense, said Crystal. Why would a terrorist be wandering around in the woods? Pay no attention. Nicky was so tired of the crisis. It has been going on now for the months. On TV and the radios, it was all you ever heard about. How our side and their side had come almost, but no quite to the point of declaration all out the war. In the last week or so, the radio has started broadcasting the frightening instructions of every hour. In the event of a declaration of war or a large-scale terrorist attacks, cities will be evacuated in an orderly fashion. Residents will be directed to the safe locations. Citizens should remain calm. It seems to Nikki that everything in this world had gone wrong, including her own family. 8 months ago, her father had left on a government job. He couldn't tell them where he was going or what he was supposed to do, and he warned that he might not be able to get in touch with them very often. This turned out to be true. She and her mother had had exactly one postcard from him. The postmark had been smuggled, so they couldn't tell where the card has been from. And the message was no help either. It said, "Dear Rachel and Nikki, I'm working hard. Everything is fine. Don't worry. I hope you are both doing well. Love, Dad." But they were all not doing well. Nikki's mother missed Nikki's father and couldn't bear not knowing where he was. She worried about losing her job, and so she worked too hard, and so she was always tired and sad. Aunt Nikki hadn't feel happy or safe for a long time. She hated Philipida. Something awful seemed always about to happen there. The emergency siren blasted night and day. Government's helicopters circled over the head. In the street where the trashes blew in the wind. Dangerous people might be around any corner. And the school, a tall, grim building with the sticking bathrooms, was just as bad. The books were older than the students. The teachers were too tired to teach, and mean kids prowled the halls. Nikki hated being at the school, but she didn't much like being at home, either in the big 10th floor condo where she and her mother lived, with its dusty, unrested room and its a huge plate glasses window that gives a frightening view straight down to a tiny street below. She was home all alone too much lately. She was nervous and restless. She had read half a book and set it down. She had worked on her amazing things, scrapbooks, and got bored after pasting it just one picture. She had gazed through her binocular at the people going by on the street below, which she used to do for hours. But even her endless curiosity seems to have faded, and she turned away after a few minutes. When she was really desperate, she would turn on the TV, even though there was almost nothing on but news, and the news was always the same. Grim government spokesmen, troop in and camouflage, dashing around in the foreign places, and the skeleton of an blown up cars and buses. Sometimes the president would come on him with the white hair, always brushed perfectly smooth, his neat white beard giving him a look of wisdom. "These are the dangerous times," he would say, "but with the help of God we will prevail." She was lonely at home, with her father gone and her mother always at work, and she was lonely at the school because both her best friends have moved. Kate to Washington later last year and Sophie to Florida 2 months ago. Sometimes late at the night, where when her mother still wasn't home, Nikki felt like someone is in a tiny lifeboat drifting by itself in a big, dark, dangerous sea. That is why, as soon as she heard about Green Heaven, her great grandfather's house in the New Woods, before she had been even seen it, she decided it would be her home. She loved its name. Her heaven was a safe place, and that is what she wanted. The trouble was, Crystal and her mother wanted to sell it. "But why can't we sell this place instead?" Nikki had said to her mother, "and get out of an horrible city and go living in a beautiful, peaceful place for a change." Nikki had actually never been to her great grandfather's house in Yonwood, except for one time when she was too young to remember. But she had made up a picture of an Yonwood in her mind that she was sure must be close to the truth. It was rather like a Swiss kiss villages, she decided, where in the winter there would be a long fires in the fireplaces and a big puffy comforters on the beds, and the snows would be pure white, not filthy and grey as it was in this city. In summer, the yarn wood would be warm and green with the butterflies. In the yarn wood, she would be happy and safe. She desperately wanted to go there. After days of an arguing, she finally convinced her mother to let her at least see the houses before it was sold. All right, her mother said. Nikki took her could have take a couple of a week of school, drive down with the crystal her mother couldn't leave work, and help her get the place fixed up and put on the markets. Nikki agreed, but her real plan was different. Somehow she would pursue Crystal to keep the house, not sell it, and she and her mother and her father, when he came back, would go and live together, and everything will be different and better. That was her goal first. But since she was sure that she was going to be in a life changing trip, she thought that she might as well as add the other goals as well. Altogether, she had set herself three. First, to keep her great grandfather's house from being sold so she would live in it with her parents. Second, to fall in love. She was 11 now, and she thought it was a time for this, not to fall in love in a permanent way. For this, just to have the experience of being madly, passionately in the love. She knew she was a passionate person. She had a big love inside her and she needed to give it. Third, to do something helpful for the world. What's that would be, she had no idea. But the world needed help badly. She would keep her eyes open for an opportunity. They were driving now up the town's main business street. It was in fact called as the main street. Nicky saw the name as a sign. They passed the church whose steeple Nicky had seen from her eyeways. In the front of it were a two-legged wooden sign that said in hand-painted letters Church of an Fiery Vision. Nicky could tell that though that the sign used to say something else. The old name of a church has been painted over. Beyond the church, the shopping district began. Probably it was pretty in summer. Nicky thought that, but now in February, it had a grey, unshuttered look, as if the buildings themselves were cold. Some stores were open and the people walked in and out of them. Both, but the others looked permanently closed. The windows dark. There was a movie theater, but its ticket booth was boarded up. There was a park, but its swings and the picnic tables were wet and empty. Crystal turned left, down the uphill from a block, and turned right on a street lined with an old houses. No one on one side of the street it was Cloud Street. Its sign says that ground sloped upward so that the house stood up high. At the crest of their lawns, there were a huge houses with the columns and a wide porches and a number of chimneys. The people in there, Nicky thought, would be sitting beside roofing wires on an evening like this, probably drinking the hot chocolate. It is this one, said Crystal, drawing in towards the curb. Nicky gasped. This one? I am afraid so. Her aunt stopped the car and Nicky gasped at the house. Stunned, rain poured down, but she opened the window anyway to get a better look. It was more of a castle than a home. It loomed over them, immense and massive, 3-story high. At one corner was a tower, round with a high window. The step slate roof bristling with the chimneys. Rain ran down in its sheet, glistering in the last of the daylight. You can't sell this house, Nicky said. It is too wonderful. It is awful, said her aunt. You will see. A gust of wind dipped the branches of a pine tree that grew close to the house, and Nicky thought that she saw a light in a high window. Does anyone still live there? She asked. No, said Crystal. Just the mice and the cockroaches. When Nicky looked up, the light was gone. The third floor. They put up the hoods of their jackets and dashed through the pettling rain, although the path up the steps, and across the stone terrace to the white wooden door. The Youngwood real estate office has sent Crystal a key. She lifted it into the keyhole, turned it, and pushed the door open. They stepped into a wide hall. Crystal groped for a light switch, and a light came on, revealing walls hung with an gilt framed paintings of an old fashioned people, such old paintings that they were nearly black. At the end of a hall was a flight of stairs curving up into the darkness. Though an archway to the left was an dining room, but the chair stood around a long table. Though an archway to the right was an living room. The front parlor, Crystal said, turning on a lamp. It was gloomy room, dark red curtains at the window, a living, a living things itself. And now, in its sudden emptiness, knowing its family no longer wanted it, she imagined it must feel frightened and lonely. Well, I want you, she thought. I think you are wonderful. Remembering that there was a third story, Nikki looked for the another stairways. She found it behind a door to the left of the big front stairs. These weren't broad and polished by the narrow and the plain. There was no handrail along the wall. At the top was a closed door. She opened it to find herself in a hall with the two doors on each side. She looked into all the rooms. Two of them were crammed full of stuffs, suitcases, and the boxes and the hat boxes, enormous old trunks with the letters scratched, stab off in paper and a portrait in broken flames and a mildered books and a paper racked packages and a grocery bag stuffed with who knows what, all of it dragged in a swags of dusty cobwebs. The third room was a tiny bathroom that hadn't been cleaned for a while. But the fourth room wasn't wonderful. It was a big and an airy with the windows on the two sides. The tower formed one corner of it, making a circular alcove with windows all around and a wide window seat running beneath them. The perfect place for sitting with a book on a sunny day, or with a light lamp over the shoulders, or on a dark day like this one. Nike guessed that his room has been a nursery because the old toys were jumbled into the cabinets along the one wall. A rolled up rack lay at one end of the room, and by the windows was a rocking chair. At the far end of a room stood an iron belt, neatly made as if it just waiting for her. This would be her room, she decided. She loved it already. As she was about to go back into the hall, sounded stopped her. It was a sort of a squeak or a cry, cut short as if someone had clapped a hand over the squeaker's mouth. Nikki stood still and listened. At first, she heard nothing, just the patter of rain on the windows. She was about to move on when she heard it again. Two squeaks this time, and a bump. Instead to be coming from the closet, she had frozen suddenly, reminding the light she had seen from the street. What if someone danger was hiding in the closet? A bulgar surprised in the middle of an bulgari, or a homeless person who had sneaking into the house, or even a terrorist. She hesitated. There was another squeak, very faint but definitely coming from the closest. In a chocked voice, Nikki said, You in there?" No answer. Nikki curiously took over. This happened to her a lot. Her hungry for finding things out was so strange that it overcomes caution and even common senses. So now, although she was afraid, she dashed to the closest, flung open the door, and leapt back. Inside, pressed up against the rear wall, half hidden by the shirts and the dresses dangling from the hangers, was a tall, then a thin and white, terrifying eyes. Her hands were wrapped around the muzzle of a small, wildly squirming dog. The girl in the closet, Nikki started. The girl started back. The dog wriggled in her arms and patted at his hind legs frantically. Who are you? Nikki asked. The girl hunched up her shoulders and craned her towards Nikki. She had a long face and a thin down brown, scratchy hair. Her front teeth were a little crooked because she said in an horror whisper, Don't tell that I am here. Please don't tell. The girl stepped cautiously out of the closet. I am not supposed to be here, she said. The doctor wrenched its muzzle out of her hands and yelled. She grabbed it again. She was wearing a jeans and a limp green sweaters. Nikhil could see that the girl was older than she was a teenager. But why are you here? Said Nikki. I took care of the old man, the girl said. She spoke in a terribly whisper. For the last 6 months till he died, but now I don't have now here to go. And if they find me, they will put me in a home and take him always. She ducked her chin towards the dog. So I need to stay here till I can figure out what you to do next. What is your name? Nikki asked. She spoke in an whisper too. Amanda Stokes, said the girl. What is your name? What is yours? Nikki told her. Arthur Green, and was a great grandfather, she said. My family own this house now. Oh Lord, I said Amanda. She had a worried looking faces as if she has been worrying all her life. Are you coming to come and live here? Yes, said Nikki firmly, but not right now. So you won't tell me that I am here. Nikki considered. Would it be wrong to keep this girl as a secret? She didn't want to do anything wrong, but it seems to her that telling on an Amanda would cause more harm than not. What would if matters if she stayed here a few long days longer? I can live here really quick, Amanda said. The dog jerked in her room and tried to yelp, even with her pretty quiet usually. What is his name? Otis. I found him a couple of days ago, out by the dump. I know he doesn't want no owner because he didn't have collars and he was really different. I wished him in the lorry sink. Nicky scratched the dog behind his small, pointed ears. He was light-colored dog, a sort of an strawberry blonde with a round brown eyes. His fur grew in a way that made his face look like a ragged sunflower. Nicky dashed into the hall and shouted him upstairs. Commodore called her and let's get settled in. She went back into the bedroom. Okay, she said. I won't tell you about. You have to be really quiet. Stuff some rags under the door, and this door and that door, hall door both. I will try and keep my aunt from coming up here. If she is going to, I will try to warm you. Oh, yes, thank you so much, Aunt, Amanda said. Thank you a lot. I just have a few for a couple days. I am looking for a job, and when I got one, I will find me a place of my own. Nicky nodded. Goodbye, she said, and she dashed back down the stairs. For dinner that night, they had a tomato soup from a can Crystal found in the cupboard. They sat at a big dining room and ate while the train beat on the windows. On a pad of paper, Crystal started making a list of all the things she had to go to get the houses ready for sale. Call cleaning services, call auction house, call salvage palace, talk to the lawyer, call painter, call plumbers. It was clear to Nikki that Crystal would be spending a lot of time on the phone. Crystal, nice said, I don't see anything so awful about the green heaven. Why do you say it is awful? It's huge and dark and impossible to clean. The kitchen is unspeakable. Why do you say the plumbing is ancient? The whole place smells like mice. That is just for a start. But it could be repaired, couldn't it? With a great effort and an expenses, Crystal went back to her list. Schedule open houses, she wrote. She tapped a long red fingernail on the table, thinking. Crystal wasn't exactly beautiful, but she always wore a stylish cloth and fixed her up. Nail polish, earrings, makeup, their hair was a sort of an streaky blonded colors that required a frequent visit to the beauty salon. She had been married twice. For that, there been an Uncle Brent, and later there would been an Uncle Brandon. Now there was no one, which was probably one reason Crystal was more snappish and impatient than usual. Crystal said nice. If you could live in any kind of a houses, what kind it would be? Crystal looped up. She gazed as nice Nikki blandly for a second, but her mind somewhere else. Then she said, well, I can tell you what it wouldn't be. It wouldn't be an old pile like the Green Heaven. And it would be an dinky, stacky little apartment like the one I live in now. Now, what's then? Said Nicky. A gracious house, said Crystal. Big rooms, big windows, a big garden. And she leaned forward and smiled a very little smile. A nice big man to live in it with me. Nicky laughed. Another husband? She said. The first two weren't quite right, said Crystal. Would you want to have a dog? A dog? Heaven, no. Dog ruined the furnitures. But if a dog just showed up and needed a house, would you keep it? Certainly not. It would go straight to the pond to wait for a happy life with someone else. She spooned up the last of her soup. Why are you asking about dogs? Just wondering, said Nicky. With a sinking heart, I like dogs. After dinner, Crystal went to take a bath and Nicky dashed up to the third floor. She tapped on the door of an nursery and Amanda, in her pajamas, opened it. What is this? Should on his hand, Hind's legs to greet Nicky, and she hugged at petted him. Everything okay? She asked Amanda. Yeah, Amanda said. I'm being real quiet. Good, said Nicky, because I found out Crystal doesn't like dogs. We have to be extremely careful. Okay, said Amanda. I will put him under the cover with me tonight. Nicky gave Otis one more pat and hurried back downstairs. For a while, she and Crystal sat in a front parlor and watched the news. A local announcer was talking. Several residents in the Hickory Cove and Creek sites, he said, have posted signs of unusual activities in the nearby wooded areas. A hiker claimed to have caught a glimpse in a remote park of an woods of a man wearing a white or light tan coat. Residents of the area are advised to be alert to anything out of an ordinary, including unknown person arriving in this town. Evidence of an tampering with the buildings, pipelines, or electrical equipment, and strange behavior of anything. Then the president came on. Nicky didn't like listening to him because his voice always sounded too smooth. He said something about the Flanex nation and missile deploy and 14 countries and the level 7 alerts. Crystal frowned. It gets closer every day, she said. Why does? What does? Crystal just shook her head. Big trouble, she said. The president ended with his usual sentences. Let us pray to the God for the safety of our people. Nikki always wondered about this. This idea seems to be that if you prayed extremely hard, especially if a lot of people prayed at once, maybe God could change the things. The trouble was, what if your enemies was praying too? Which prayers would God listen to? She sighed. Crystal, she said, I'm so sick of this crisis. I know, said Crystal. Fling off the TV, we all are. But it doesn't help to worry. All we can do is to keep our wits about us, not let us fear take over, and try to be a good little people and not add to the badness. She smiled at Nicky's and stood up, tired. Nicky nodded. Which room would you like to sleep in? Crystal asked. Can you have the first pick? The room she really wanted as the one of the third floor, but right now it was occupied. So Nikki chose one of her bedrooms on the first floor, and Crystal took the one next to it. They found the sheets and the blankets in the linen closets and make up the beds. And they unpacked the suitcases and hung their clothes in the closet. Nikki put her nighties on and slid between the sheets of an enormous bed. She thought about Amanda and the little dog, hidden away upstairs. They would be going to bed now, too. It would be nice, she thought, to sleep with the dog curled up next to you. The bed's black paws rose towards the ceiling in the darkness. They looked like a two tin soldiers standing guard. Nikki wondered whose this room had belonged in the years past. Who else had lain here looking at these posts and at the violet flowered wallpaper and the stains of an ceilings? She wished that she could knew about their lives, not just her grandfather's, but all lives in his house, all those ancestors she had never known. This is how Nikki was. She wanted to know about everybody and everything, not just encyclopedia type information, but ordinary like what people did at their jobs and what their houses look like inside, what they have talked about. Houses look like inside and what they talked about. When she passed two or three people walking together on the street, she always hoped to catch and interrogating the bit of an conversation like, I found her lying there dead, or and he left that very day without telling a soul and was never seen again. But almost always all she heard were the dull, connecting bits of a conversation like, and so I said to her, and yeah, I think so too. And so it is really a kind of like, and by the time they said whatever came next, they were out of her spot. She also wanted to know about the things that weren't so ordinary, strange, extraordinary things like, we are there, people on the other planet. Was ESP real? Were there still places on the earth where no one had ever been? Were there animals that no one had yet discovered? In a magazine, she had come across a photograph of an dust mite taken with an electron microscope, a dust mite as well as too small to see with their naked eyes. But when you look at these pictures and manufactured it many times, you could see that it was as complicated and weird as a monster in the science fiction movie with the fangs and the flares and the bristles. When Nikki saw the picture, she suddenly understood that the whole other world existed right alongside the world of the thing she could see. In the dust under the furnitures, in between the stat of and carpets, even crawling on her own skin and inside her guts were created of an unbelievable strangeness. She allowed knowing this. She took the dust mine pictures with her everywhere she went. Now she listened to the rain pattering steadily at the window and closed her eyes. She thought about the spirits of all the people who had lived here. Maybe they were still hovering around, wondering who was coming next. It is going to be me, she told them silently. I am going to live here, and this reminded her some things she had forgotten to do. She sat up and turned the light bags on. In the drawer of a bedside table, she rummaged around until she found a stubby pencil and a scrap of a paper. On the paper she wrote, Keep Greenhaven, fall in love, help the world. Her three goals, she was determined to accomplish them all. Break in. Something in the middle of that night, a rain fell as Nikki slept. Someone or something came out of a forest above the town. The night was dark and moonless, and whomsoever it came so quietly that no one heard him. Vanny Hollister, who ran the Black Oak Inn at the north end of the town, glanced out the window when he got up to go to the bathroom around 2 a.m. And he was pretty sure that he saw something moving on the road, but he didn't have given him the glasses on, so he couldn't tell him what it was. Maybe a man in a raincoat. Early the next morning, it was Friday. A boy named Grover Person was walking up the alley in the back of cozy corner cave, hunting for a particular kind of wildlife on his way to the school. When he noticed that the glass window next to the cafe back door was broken, he stopped to investigate. He could see that the window must have been punctured it from the outside. A few garments lay on the ground below the window, but most of the glasses was inside, scattered across the restaurant's kitchen counter. Some jagged sharks remained in the window frame, and something else was there too. It looks like a white dish towel snagged on an broken glasses. On the towel was a dark stain. Groover breathed at it. It looks like the blood. He went around to the front of a restaurant where Andy Hot, the manager, was just opening up. Andy said, Groover, someone broke your back window last night. And Andy stood stock still and gazed at him for a second. The sunlight with its stone through gaps in the leftover rain clouds flashed on his glasses and lit up his high, shiny forehead. Then he charged around to the back with a Grover behind him. When he saw the broken windows and the strained cloths, he let out a shriek that broken people running from all around. In a minute, the entire four-man police force and a 10 or a 12 other people had gathered behind the gauzy corner. They started at the broken window, which looked like a great snabble, toothed mouth with a bloody tongue hanging out of the bottom. Stay back, said the chief of a police, Ralph Gurney. Don't touch anything. This is a crime scene. People moved back. Grover could hear their murmuring to each other in a worried voice. Andy, you in there? Called the officer's granny through the window. What's been taken? From inside, Andy called. Nothing much. It is look like just a package of chicken. So said Officer Granny. This must be either the prank or a threat. Again came the uneasy murmurs from the crowd. At the another time, this broken window might have seems like a minor incident. After all, no one was hurt, not much was stolen, but people was already on the edge. It has been more than 6 months since Attila Tower had her terrible visions, and every day the vision seems closer to coming true. Last night, the Fanalex nations had announced that they might have a visuals developed in the 14 countries. The United States had replied by raising the alert level to 7. Everyone knew that the terrorists were all over the place. It seems that the evils of a world were coming far too close for the comfort. Officer Granny ran a strip of an yellow tape around the back area of the cafe, roping it off so no one could disturb the sight. Then he scanned the crowd, his eyes lit on an comfortably plump woman wearing a red down jacket that made her look even plumper. She had a short brownish blonde ponytail that stuck out through a hole in her red basket hat. Brenda, said the officer Granny, what do you think? Grover was in danger of being late for the school by this time. He had already been late twice this month. If he was late again, he might get a note sent home to his parents. But he had to risk it. Was too interesting to miss. The woman stepped forward. Grover knew her, of course, everyone did. Mrs. Brenda Beeson was the one who had figured out the prohibited mumbled word and explained what they meant. She and her community, the Reverend Lomas, Mayor Orwell Milton, the police chief Ralph Gurney, and a few others were the most important people in the town. Officer Gurney raised the yellow tape to so Mrs. Beeson could duck under it. She stood before the window a long time, her back to the crowd, while everyone waited to see what she would say. Clouds sailed slowly across the sun, turning everything dark and light and dark again. To Groover it seems like an ages they all stood there, holding their breaths. He resigned himself to being late for the school and started thinking up a creative excuses. The front door of his house has stuck and he couldn't get it open. His father needed him to help fish drawn rats out of an flooded basement. His knee has popped out off and joined and stayed out for a half an hour. Finally, Mrs. Beeson turned to the face then. Well, it is just goes to show, she said. We never used to have a people breaking the window and stealing the things. For all our hard works, we will still got a better eggs almost us among us. She gave an unseparated sigh, and her breath made a puff of an fog in an chilly air. If this is someone else's idea of a fun, that person should be very, very ashamed of himself. This is no time for a wild, stupid behavior. It is probably the kid, said a man standing near the Grover. Why did people always blame the kids for everything like this? As far as Grover could tell, grown up caused a lot more trouble in the world than the kids. On the other hand, said Mr. Beeson, it could be a threat or a warning. Where we have here the report about someone is wandering around in the hills. She glanced back at the bloody rag hanging in the window. It might be even a message of some sort. It looks to me like the stain could be a letter, maybe an S or R. Grover pointed to the stain on the clothes. To him, it looked more like an A, or maybe just even a random watch. It might be B, said someone standing near him, or an H, said someone else. Mrs. Beeson nodded. Could be, she said. This yes could stand for sin, or F for an R. It it could stand for ruin. If you will let me have a piece of an cloth, Ralph, I will show it to Althea and see if she has anything to say about it. Just then the Vanny Hollister happened to pass by, saw the crowd and climbed in about when what he had seen in the night. Their story frightened the people even more than the blood and the broken glasses. All around him grew a yurt, there murmuring, someone out there. He is giving us a warning. What does he mean to do? He is trying to scare us. One woman began to cry. Oh, Mike, go. As usual, said the Brenda Beeson, should not pronounce upon the things until she was in a full possession of the facts, which she was not, and that to him the botches of her blood looked more like an spoon soups than are. Several people told him angrily to be quiet. But Grover had lost interest now that he had heard Mrs. Beeson's verdict. If he ran really fast, he might not be late after all. He took off. When he got to the school, he told the first person he saw about the break-in, and then he told the next person, and the pretty soon kids were crowding up around him. His friend Martin handed him a piece of a paper and told him to draw the blood blot on it, exactly the way it was. I can't remember it exactly, he said, but it was more or less like this. He drew a gloppy string of an blotches. That's supposed to look like a letter. Martin frowned, peering at Grover's drawing that his thick framed glasses. Well, I am not drawing it perfect. May it was more like than this. He drew a different blob. That is not it either. He laughed. But Martin's frowned again. Do it right, he said. I don't appreciate the way you have clowning around. Grover drew it again, as well as he could remember, and she said that it was an S or R. Martin wanted to know. She wasn't sure which, said Grover. And what did she say it stood for? Someone asked. He told them, and he answered a lot of other questions too, showing off Officer Gurney had strung the yellow tape and repeating what Mrs. Greason had said, and imitating with a few high pitched screams thrown in. The sob of an woman who had been so frightened. He limited Hoyt Coy to copying his gloomy look so well that everyone laughed. Hottie McCoy said it looked like a soup spoon, he said. Yeah, said Martin, but Hot McCoy is a weirdo. Maybe so, said Grover, but Mrs. Beeson doesn't know everything. Grover, said Martin, his voice rose and his face turned almost the same red as his hair. She took the prohibited vision seriously. Even if you didn't, the bell rang. Grover was late after all, and was so everyone who had been listening to him. Got to go, he said. Martin called at him. This will be my first late mark on the whole year, he said. It is not my fault, said Gruva. You didn't have to stand around talking to me. But Martin just turned away. He had caught through the Gruva as he hurried toward his classroom. He used to be nicer than he was now. The Fury Vision. That morning, Crystal poked around in the kitchen cupboard and found about nothing too fit to eat. Would you feel like walking downwards and getting us few grocery? She said, Nikki. I will start cleaning up this whole kitchen. So nice put a jacket on her and went downhill 2 blocks off in Main Street, thinking how nice it was to be out by herself. And she couldn't safely be in the city. The stores were just opening. It was cold, but the sun came out sometimes from between the clouds, and the town looked washed clean. Quite a few people was already outside. She noticed that nearly all of them held the cell phones to their ears as they walked. Of course, she was using to see all the cell phones in the city. There, half the people you passed were jabbering away. But here, the people weren't talking to their phones. They were just listening. It was odd. She passed a small restaurant called the Cozy Corner Cafe, where several people were standing out, talking in an excited voice, and a police car was just pulling away. Something must have happened there. Maybe a customer had taken sick. She passed a drugstore, a bakery, and a shoe store. She passed a close-up movie theater where a sign stuck over the ticket window says, Pray instead. In the window of a clothing store, she saw a display of a white t-shirt says that don't do it in the big red letters on the front. And after that, she kept noticing the people on the streets wearing these t-shirts. Don't do that. Do what? She wondered. As she passed an alley between a hardware stores and a computer repair shops, she heard a strange sound. It was a kind of an hum with a rhythm to it. Mm-hmm. A sound that a machine might make. She stooped and looked around, but she couldn't see where it was coming from. She could tell that the other people on the sidewalk noticed the sound too. They frowned, but they didn't seem puzzled by it. Just annoyed or maybe a little frightened, a few of them started walking faster as if it got her get away. The sound faded after a moment. Nikki decided to must be some gadget in the computer shop. Farther on, she found the Yonkwood market and there she bought some breads, milk, egg and powdered cocoa. She bought a small box of a dog biscuit too and tucked this under her jacket. Nikki was just turning off the main street on the way back to Greenhaven when, from the high overhead, there came a distant roar that quickly rose to a freezing scream, and 5 fighters jet streaked across the sky. The jets came often these days. They scared her. She stopped working, set down the bag of groceries, and put her hands over her ears until the jets were gone. Then she felt someone touched her shoulders. She looked up to see an elderly woman standing over her. It might be starting, the woman said in a shaky voice. It might be starting right now. You never know. But it is the best not to be scared if you can help it. You need to have faith. That is what I say. Well, we will be all right here because of what we are doing. As long as we have faith, that is the main thing. The spidery hat patted Nikki's shoulders. So don't worry, little girl, and remember to pray. And the woman glanced upwards. We will be all right now because she trailed off and tottered away, leaving Nikki feeling the opposite of reassured. Maybe people here were just as scared as they were in the city. They made her heart sink a little. But on the other hand, the woman had said, We will be all right. It was confusing. Once she got back to the Greenhaven, thought she had forgotten about it. She hid the dog biscuits in her bedroom and then went into the kitchen where the Crystal made a hot chocolate for them. They sat at a huge, elegant dining room table. Crystal got out her to-do list. The room is so majestic, Nikki said. She had decided to point out the good things about the green heaven as often as she could to change the Crystal minds about selling it. I suppose so, said Crystal, glancing up. Certainly, this table is very fine. It should fetch a good price. She went back to her list. Then I will make her arrangements at the auction houses and find a cleaning services. I should be back by noon. I will stay here, said Nikki. I can start going through the stuffs. You will be all right. You won't fall down the stairs or lean out the high windows. Of course, I won't, said Nikki. I will just take a stuff out of a cupboard and boxes and look at it. I will separate it into the stuff to keep up the stuff to throw away. Throw away will be a big pile, Crystal said. When the Crystal had gone, Nikki fetched a dog biscuit and dashed up the stairs. Amanda, she called. It is me. She heard a barking when she came to the door at the top. When she opened it, she saw Otis rocketing towards her. He skipped to the stop in front of her and rose to his hind feet, stretching it front paw up and as if he wanted to pat her face. She knelt down and scratched her ears. Hi, Otis, she said. You're sure as cute. Amanda came out into the hall. She was still in her bathroom. I heard Otis barking when I came up the stairs, Nikki said. I don't see how we keep him a secret if he barks. Crystal will hear him. Oh Lord, said Amanda. Maybe I could get him a muffle. Then seems like a kind of an cruel, Nikhil said. There must be a better way. Nikki went into the nursery room and looked around. A long tube of an rolled up rug gave her an idea. We could we could soundproof this room, she said. I'm sure we could. They spent the next 2 hours doing it. They unrolled the big rug. They found small rug in the other room, brought them up to the nursery and spread them out to cover the entire floor. From the bathrooms and the linen closets, they bought the towels and the blankets, which they hung over the windows and the door with the thumb tabs. Everyone and then Nikki would go downstairs. Amanda would get Otis to bark, and Nikki would listen hard. Finally, after the 4 tires, Nikki couldn't hear a thing. It works, she said when she came back up. She survived what they had done. It was more than a soundproof room. It was also a strange and beautiful room, almost like the inside of a tent, with its carpet floor and walls hung with the blankets. It glowed with a pattern and the colors, faded blue and the faded red on the floor, rose and the lavender, pale green and the gold on the walls. The light was dim now because they had covered some of the windows, so they brought up a lamp with a pratchett shades from one of the rooms below, and the more cushions for the window seat and other rocking chairs. If only we could make a fire in the first place, Nikki said. This would be the coziest room in the world. It is really nice, Amanda agreed. Otis might chew these rugs though. I will buy him some toys, Nikki said. You can teach him to chew those instead. She bent down and rumpled Otis' ears. Now, she said, I'm going to start looking through the stuff. Looking through what? Everything in the house. I want to see it all, Nikki said. Have you noticed any scrapbooks while you have been here? Or diaries or a photograph album? Amanda pondered. Maybe in the front parlor cabinet, she said. So Nikki went downstairs, filled a box with a stiff she found in the parlor cabinet, and took it back up the nursery. She and Amanda sat on a window seat beneath a lamp and took through it. A great deal of it was boring. An old pack of bent placards, a calendars from 1973, a photo album containing 18 faded photos, every one of them of a black Cocker Spaniel. But there was also some old letters, some National Geographical magazines, and quite a few albums with the pictures of the people. Jammed away in the back, she found the 3 very old-looking cards with the black borders. They were from the different people. but all of them were dated in 1918 and all of them in an old-fashioned handwriting, said more or less the same thing. We send heartfelt condolence for your tragic loss. What was the tragic loss? She wondered. None of the cards said, "Hey, I thought of something else you would probably want to look at." Amanda said, "I will go get it." She went downstairs and came up with a minute, like with a little brown notebook. "The old man wrote in this something when I was taking care of him," she said, handing it to Nikki. Nikki opened the notebook. Her great grandfather's name was written inside the front cover, Arthur Green. She leafed through it. It looks more like a series of an jotting than a real journey. He made the first entry at the beginning of December, just a couple of a month ago. Thank you.